In the spring of 1944, in a small town called Alcolu, South Carolina, America's justice system committed a crime of its own. A child just 14 years old was executed in the electric chair. His name was George Stinney Jr. This is the story of a boy, a town, a crime, and a country deeply divided by race. Alcolu was a segregated mill town where black and white families lived in separate neighborhoods. White families had larger homes near the mill, while black families lived in small wooden shacks on the other side of the railroad tracks. It was the Jim Crow South, a world where black children went underfunded schools, where black families worked the hardest jobs for the lowest pay, and where justice, if it came at all, was rarely equal. George lived with his parents and siblings in a modest home. He was known to be quiet, shy, and thin, weighing barely 90 pounds. His world was small: school, church, and playing with his brothers and sisters. On March 23, 1944, two white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 8-year-old Mary Emma Thames, went out riding their bicycles to pick flowers. That afternoon, they did not return home. A search party was formed. By evening, their bodies were found in a ditch. Both had suffered brutal head injuries. The town was horrified, and whispers began to spread quickly. Who could have done it? The very next day, police arrested George Stinney Jr. and his brother Johnny. The reason? A witness claimed George had spoken to girls while they rode past his house. That was all it took. Johnny was released. George was kept. He was questioned for hours, alone, without his parents, without a lawyer. Later, police claimed he confessed, but there was no written statement, no signed paper, no evidence beyond the word of the officers. In reality, George always said he was innocent. His sister later revealed that George was with her at the time of the murders, watching the family's cow graze. But no one wanted to listen to a black child's defense. George's trial took place just 1 month later. He was represented by a lawyer with no experience in criminal defense. No witnesses were called for him. No cross-examination was done on his behalf. The jury consisted of all white men. Not a single black person was allowed to sit in judgment. The trial lasted only 2 hours. The jury deliberated for just 10 minutes. Their verdict, guilty of murder. Their sentence, death by electrocution. George's parents were not even allowed in the courtroom. They learned of the verdict outside the courthouse, surrounded by angry crowds demanding vengeance. On June 16, 1944, George was taken to Columbia, South Carolina, to face execution. He was so small that he could not fit into the electric chair built for grown men. Prison guards had to place a Bible beneath him so he could sit high enough for the straps. Witnesses later described his face, wide-eyed, as the mask was lowered over him. When the switch was pulled, the current was so strong it knocked the mask off his face, exposing his terrified expression to the room. It took several jolts before George was dead. He was 14 years old, a child executed by the state. For decades, George's story was nearly forgotten. The people of Alcolu rarely spoke of it. His family carried the pain in silence, forced to leave town for their safety. But whispers of injustice never completely disappeared. Civil rights groups, lawyers, and activists continue to bring up George's case as a symbol of America's broken justice system. In the early 2000s, George's story began to gain attention again. Journalists uncovered details that had long been hidden. The rushed trial, the lack of evidence, the forced confession. Historians and lawyers began to push for a retrial. Not to bring George back, but to clear his name. In 2014, 70 years after his execution, George's case was reopened. Judge Carmen Mullen reviewed the evidence and declared what many had known all along. George Stinney had not received a fair trial. His conviction was vacated. George was officially declared innocent. But justice delayed is justice denied. George never had the chance to grow up, to live, to see his name cleared. His family never had the chance to welcome him home. George Stinney Jr.'s story is more than just history. It is a warning. It shows us how fear, prejudice, and injustice can take the life of an innocent child. And it asks us a haunting question. If this happened then, could it happen again? This is the story of George Stinney Jr., the boy who was just 14 years old and executed for a crime he never committed. The horrifying truth is that justice didn't just fail George, it killed him. And the greater truth? This kind of injustice still happens today. So don't let George Stinney's story be forgotten. Share it, talk about it, learn from it, because silence protects injustice. But telling the truth and demanding accountability is how we fight back. If you believe stories like George's must be told, subscribe and join this channel as we continue exposing the truth behind injustice. Because George Stinney deserved better, and so does every victim of a broken system.